Welcome back to continuing Model 4 Arts, Aesthetics, and Cultural Expression. And before we begin lesson 4.4, let's just quickly see what we talked about in 4.3. We talked about the temple architecture that is prevalent in India. So, when we talked about the temple architecture, we talked about the three types of predominant architectural styles that are there in India. The first was the Nagara, that was predominantly there in the northern India. Then we talk about the Dravida, which was there in South India. Then we talked about Visara, which is a combination, a hybrid of both the Nagara and the Dravida. Now, each of these categories we saw that they are all unique, whereas their architecture is considered, where the plan is considered. Now, the difference was based on the use, on the geographical area, on the resources available, and the architectural plan. Each one of them holds its own individual identity, its own beauty, its own importance. Now we will begin with lesson 4.4, where we are going to talk about role of symbols, geometry, and proportions. Again, this is with respect to architecture. Ancient India architecture, particularly temple architecture, is deeply rooted in a profound understanding of symbols, geometry, and proportions. These elements were not merely aesthetic choices but integral to the spiritual, cosmological, and philosophical principles that underpinned the structures. The texts of Vastu Shastra and Shilpa Shastra codified these intricate relationships, aiming to create buildings that were not just shelters but microcosms of the universe. Harmony between the human and divine. So they brought about harmony. How? Because these intricate relationships that were there in Vastu Shastra and Shilpa Shastra were put together into creating these very beautiful buildings. Let's see what are the role of the various symbols. Symbols in ancient Indian architecture are ubiquitous, expressing complex philosophical and religious ideas. Every element from the overall form, from the minute carvings, carries symbolic meaning. Now, we did see that the whether it is Nagara, whether it is Dravidya, whether it's Visara, they all had their different architectural styles. They had their own carvings, their own symbolic meanings. Cosmic representation. The temple itself is a symbol of the cosmos, the larger universe. Garbhagriha, the sanctum, sanctorum, literally the womb chamber. It symbolizes the heart of the universe, the dwelling place of the divine, and the point of creation. It's often dark, representing the undifferential primordial state from which the universe emerges. Shikhara, the Vimana or the tower, symbolizes Mount Meru, the cosmic mount or axis mundi connecting the earth to the heavens. Its rising from signifies the ascent to higher spiritual realms. That is why the tower like shape of the Shikhara or the Vimana. The Gopuram, the gateway. In Dravida style, the towering Gopurams symbolize the threshold between the mundane world outside and the sacred space within. So there's a little margin, a little boundary there in between the world and the sacred space which is within the temple. They often feature intricate carvings, narrating myths, acting as visual sermons. Now, these carvings, often when we see temples, they have a story to tell. They are not just standalone kind of carvings, they would be narrating a story if you look at them very carefully and observe it. Deities and mythology. Sculptures and reliefs depicting gods, goddesses, mythical creatures, celestial beings, apsaras, gandharvas, and scenes from epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata and the Puranas. These carvings are not just decorative but narrate stories, convey spiritual teachings, and invoke specific energies. Like I said previously, they have a story to share with us. So, if we look carefully at the scene, we will be able to understand what it is trying to depict. It could be a scene from the Ramayana, it could be a scene from the Mahabharata, and also various other Purans. Now, the Dwarpals or the guardians. Fierce guardians at entrances symbolizes protection of the sacred space from negative influences. We these days also believe in some kind of negative energy, but then we always have a guard up. So the Dwarpals or the guardians were the guardians so that they could ward off any negative influence that had its aim towards the temple to the holy shrine. Natural elements that came into play into the construction of these temples. So, the very first, that is lotus, a pervasive symbol of purity, beauty, spiritual awakening, and creation as it rises unstained from muddy waters. We see how pretty a lotus is. Despite of where it is grown, it continues to be pretty, seen on ceilings, bases, and decorative motifs. The animals, which form a very important part. So the elephants were for strength and wisdom, the lions for royalty and power, horses, speed and vigor, peacocks, beauty and immortality. So these were the few animals which are very prominent in the architecture, often symbolize attributes of deities or serve as their mounts or vahanas. These deities used these animals as their transportation devices. Water bodies. Temple tanks, Kalyani or Pushkarni symbolize purification and the cosmic waters of creation. So we did see in few of the temples there is a water body which is within the temple campus. Now coming to the geometrical symbols, mandala and yantra. These sacred diagrams are not just geometrical patterns but visual representations of the cosmos and instruments for meditation. So, if you look at the colored picture, it is so intricately made and geometrically perfect. The Vastu Purusha Mandala is the foundational blueprint for temple layouts, representing the universe and ensuring harmonious alignment with cosmic forces. The chakra, the wheel, symbolizes cosmic cycle, time, eternal movement, and divine power. Example, Vishnu's Sudarshan Chakra. How about the role of geometry? We've been reading all along that it was all geometrically aligned. Geometry is the backbone of ancient Indian architecture, providing the precise framework for translating abstract spiritual concepts into tangible forms. The very first is Vastu Purusha Mandala. This is the most fundamental geometrical principle. It's a square grid, often 8 by 8 or 9 by 9, but variations do exist, that represents the universe and its energetic divisions. The temple plan is laid out on this grid. Then we have the central square or the Brahmasthana, is the most sacred where the primary deity resides, symbolizing the spiritual core, the base of the temple. Different sections of the grid are associated with specific deities, planets, and cosmic energies, dictating the placement of various architectural elements. square and circle. These are the primary geometrical forms. So we did see in earlier modules that a square and circle could have pretty much the same area in a different shape though. Now a square represents the earth, stability, order and manifested world. The Garbhagriha is almost always a square. The circle represents the heavens, eternity, timelessness, and the unmanifested, because a circle is a continuous process. The Shikhara or Vimana often culminates in a circular or octagonal element, Amlaka or Stupika. The circumambulatory path, the Dakshina path, is also circular. The interplay of the square and circle symbolizes the union of earth and heaven, the material and the spiritual. Axiality and symmetry. Temples are typically highly symmetrical along their central axis, reinforcing order, balance, and the idea of cosmic alignment. The progression from the entrance to the Garbhagriha is carefully orchestrated to guide the devotee towards the divine. Now here you can see the various stages, or there are 4 stages clearly, where they are planning the Parvati temple. That's in the 6th century, in the very first. Then in stage 2, we have a plan of Vishnu temple. That was in the 7th century. Then we see the stage 3, where we have the plan of Surya temple, which is the 11th century. Then we have stage 4, that is the plan of Kandarya Mahadeva temple. That was again the 11th century. So now you will be able to see how it has progressed, but how geometry has been typically the center line of architecture in olden times as well. Fractal geometry. Many Indian temples exhibit fractal-like patterns where smaller components replicate the form of the larger structure. The self-similarity. It creates a sense of infinite complexity and suggests that each part contains the essence of the whole, reflecting the Hindu philosophical idea of the universe as a complex, interconnected whole where the microcosm is reflected in the microcosm. This is evident in the repetitive miniature shikharas on the main shikhara or the numerous sculptured figures. Orientation. How was it aligned? Temples are meticulously oriented, typically eastward, to align with the rising sun, facing the rising sun, symbolizing enlightenment and spiritual awakening. This alignment harnesses cosmic energies and ensures the flow of positive vibrations. Now the role of proportions. Now geometry cannot function without correct proportions. Proportions in ancient Indian architecture were not arbitrary, but based on sophisticated mathematical ratios and an understanding of human perception, aiming to create harmonious and aesthetically pleasing structures that resonated with the divine. Then we have the modular systems in the role of proportions. Architects use modular units, often based on the human body or specific ancient measurements, to ensure consistent and harmonious relationship between different parts of the temple. This provided a scalable system for design from a small shrine to a grand complex. Then we have the auspicious ratios. Texts like the Vastu Shastra prescribed specific ratios deemed auspicious for various architectural elements. Example, height to width of pillars, dimensions of rooms, overall temple footprint. These ratios were believed to bring well-being and prosperity. Harmonic relationship. Proportional system ensured visual harmony and structural stability. Now, anything which is built correctly is pleasing to the eyes. The vertical ascent of the shikhara or vimana was carefully managed through diminishing tiers and precise ratios, creating an illusion of lightness and an upward movement. Mathematical precision. The emphasis on precise measurements and calculations was paramount. Ancient Indian mathematicians developed advanced geometric and algebraic knowledge, which was directly applied in temple construction to ensure structural integrity and adherence to symbolic designs. Symbolic proportion. The proportions often held symbolic meaning. For example, specific heights for various parts of the temple could represent different layers of the cosmos or spiritual states. The relationship between the Garbhagriha and the mandapas often reflected a journey from the outer material world to the inner spiritual core. Now, here, an article that was in the press shows a plan of the Shikhara, development of the multi Prati Shikhara of Kandara Mahadeva temple. And you can see how intricately it is designed. You can see how meticulously it has been designed and laid. Then in figure 20, we have the development of the same design. And then we have the ceiling of the mandapa also. So everything is so proportional, so geometrically aligned and pleasing to the eyes. With this, we finish lesson 4.4 and also we come to an end of the architecture and the aesthetic and the culture of the Indian knowledge system. Thank you.